Hey guys, I'm back. Okay, so this probably makes you want to scream, right? All of these graphs. It's not meant to make you want to scream. It's meant to get you to see a pattern, right? So think about when you learn things. You start with something you know, and then maybe you see a pattern that emerges when we extend our knowledge, right? So what we're talking about here is the end behavior of polynomial graphs. That sounds so official, end behavior. All that means is which ways the arrows point at the end of the graph. Are they pointing up or are they pointing down? Okay, so we have a few things to concern ourselves with. One is whether the degree of the function is odd. Okay, so think of the odd degree functions. This means degree. So a degree here, a degree of 1 is linear, right guys? A degree of 3 is cubic, and a degree of 5 is quintic. Now, linear functions we're really familiar with, right guys? So think about when you graph a line. If the slope, and here the a is positive, so let's say my line was y equals 2x plus 3. This would be my m values, my a values. So if I graph a line that's positive, what's happening at the ends? Well, the bottom, this arrow here is pointing down, and then the ending arrow is pointing up, right guys? And it's a positive slope. You can see that from the graph. So let's take some other odd functions that we don't know about yet, right? We haven't graphed cubic functions, right? Cubic or quintic functions yet. That's in our future. However, we do know something. We can see a pattern. Do you see how, just like a line, I know that this arrow to the left is going to point down, and the arrow at the end is going to point up. Now, of course, there are a lot more loop-de-loops in between than with a line. But look at the ends. If I see something common here, right? Just like here, again, starts low and ends high. So I can make an assumption that if I were to keep going, degree 7, degree 9, degree 11, I would always be able to know that the graph is going to point down to the left and up to the right. That's pretty cool, right? What if now we have a negative slope? We know it's a negative slope because we can see our line pointing down. Now we have the left side starts pointing up, starts high, and then the line at the end, when I get to the right, it ends low. So guys, just like we haven't done cubics and quintics yet, we do know that we can say the same end behavior is going to happen. If I have an a value that's negative, like here, right, I can know there's more loop-de-loops, but I know that the left arrow is going to point up and the right arrow is going to point down. Starts high, ends low. Same thing with quintic, right? I can say every time, right, that it's going to, if I have an a that's negative and a cubic or a quintic or a 7th degree or a 9th degree, any odd degree, that the ends of the graph are going to behave the same way. So if you have an odd degree, think in your mind's eye, oh, that's like a line. I'm going to do the same thing with the ends that I do when I graph a line. Okay, now let's look at another thing we know. We know all about parabolas, right guys? We know that parabolas sometimes open up, right? And sometimes they open down. So a parabola is a degree of 2. This is a quadratic, right guys? We did a lot of graphing. We're still doing graphing of these. So I can assume that just like a parabola, it starts high and ends high when I have an a value that's positive. I can then make the assumption that any even degree function, so this one's a quartic, right? This is a 4th degree, this is a 6th degree, I can make the assumptions, I could keep going, 8th degree, 10th degree. I can know that it's always going, the ends are always going to be the same. Right? I can always know that. Just by looking at the degree and whether A is positive or negative. Same thing here. Many more loopy-loops in between, but the ends are the same. So our last scenario is, what if the A value is negative? Right? We know in a parabola that means that they both point down. So guess what, guys? I can say the same thing. If I have a quartic that has a negative A value, I can assume that both of the ends are going to point down. Starts low, ends low. And same thing with a 6th degree. Right? I can assume that it's going to start low and end low. Right? And I could do it with 8th, 10th, 12th, any other even degree. So, the last thing we're going to do is we are going to sketch a polynomial graph from a description. Now, this I think is maybe the hardest part of the lesson, because it talks about where it's increasing and decreasing, and it talks about where these values are greater than 0 or less than 0. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, f of x, that just means y. Right? F of x just means y. So I actually think it's better to start with the second row of information, right? Because this is telling me where y is greater than 0, which means it's above the x-axis. And this is telling me where y is less than 0, which is below the x-axis. So let's see what they say. They say y is greater than 0 when x is less than -4. So that means -4 is a boundary point. And they're telling me y is greater than 0. So I'm going, okay, well, let's do that. And y is greater than 0 between 1 and 5. So I'm going to mark 1 and 5. And I'm going to go like this, greater than 0. Now I may have to adjust this when I deal with the first piece of information. Y is less than 0 when x is between -4 and 1. Oh, look. How about that? And when x is greater than 5. So there's my initial sketch. It tells me that f is increasing when x is between -2 and 3. Okay, so that means I have to have an increasing graph from -2 up to 3. So maybe I need to adjust this a little bit. Maybe not too much. Okay, that's an increasing graph between -2 and 3. So I did that in green. And it says it's decreasing when x is less than -2. So right here, it's decreasing. So do you guys see how it's decreasing? When I go left to right, it's decreasing when x is less than -2, and when x is greater than 3, also decreasing. So it looks like my graph is pretty good, right? So decreasing I put in red, and increasing I put in green. Okay guys, there's one of these on the practice classwork, so you will get some practice doing that. Have an awesome day.